Hello everyone. There are a couple of functions of your calculator I wanted to point out just to reiterate what you found in the videos. The first is evaluating a function. What happens if you know the x value but you're trying to figure out the corresponding y. So if you'll see in this example, you're trying to find your y value when x equals 5. One way to do it, as you learned in your last lesson, is just to plug 5 in for all of the x's and to solve for that y. You can also find it on your calculator, and what you're going to do is you're going to plug this function that they gave you into your calculator. So right here, clear those out, and it says y equals x squared, or x caret 2, x raised to the second power, minus 5x plus 2. Sketch that. Okay, so usually I use the standard window, which is negative 10 to 10 on the x and the y. So let's see how that's going to work. Okay, if I do that, this is another alternative to what you see in your videos from YouTube. Second calc, number 1, will allow you to evaluate a curve at a specific x. So if we go to 1, notice it says what's the x value, and you're just going to plug in 5. So notice the beautiful thing about this is it shows you exactly where x equals 5 is, and they're telling you at x equals 5 your corresponding y is equal to 2. So I've sketched out the function y equals x squared minus 5x plus 2, and here is where your solution is, right? Where x equals 5, your corresponding y is 2. Alright, another thing that is helpful is to evaluate where a function equals a function. So I've sketched both of these out separately. So on the one hand, I have f of x equals 3x cubed minus 8x squared. And on the other hand, I have g of x equals negative 3x minus 2. So if you look over here, you can see that in essence, I'm trying to figure out where the two functions cross each other. Okay, so if I go over to my calculator and I sketch them separately, so y equals 3x raised to the third power minus 8x raised to the second power, and that equals the other function, which is negative 3x minus 2. I'm going to graph them both simultaneously. Okay, and you can see it's a little difficult to see where these two cross, so I'm going to cut off a little bit of this on the x, so I'll get rid of that and try to get rid of a little bit of this extra x here. So on my window, I'm going to go from negative 5 to 5 on the x's, and I'll leave the y's as they are for the time being. Alright, so I can see that these two functions cross each other at 3 points. So if I do second calc, and I go to number 5 where it says point of intersection, I should be able to find those points. Okay, so it says pick a curve. Now the reason that they're saying first curve is you may end up with 5 curves, but it'll only allow you to pick 2. So I'm going to press enter, and then it jumps to another curve. You can always use your up-down arrow to jump from curve to curve. So just so that you can see that I'm definitively on the other curve, press enter, and then it says scroll up to where you think the point of intersection is, and press enter again. So then they're telling me x equals a third and y equals negative 1. So you can do that for this one as well. Second calc number 5, and you do have to do them separately. You're not going to be able to get all your points of intersection. Okay, you can see that I'm on the other curve. Enter, and then squeeze up on the point, and there you go. Alright, and that's x equals 1. Okay, from my notes, the last point would be at x equals 2. Okay, I want to point something out really quickly. You'll notice that this one says x equals 1, y equals negative 5, but I didn't use the negative 5, primarily because if you look at what you're trying to solve for, everything in here is an x, so your answer should only be in the x. So x equals negative a third, x equals 1, and x equals 2. Alright, so here's another option. What happens if you have a function is equal to 0. Notice this was function equals another function, but this is function equals 0. So these points where your function crosses the x-axis, these are called roots. R-O-O-T-S. It's a fancy word for it. Your calculator does that as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to let y1 equal this function right there. Okay, so on my calculator, I clear both of those out, and I get 2x raised to the third power minus 5x plus 6. Okay, and the reason that this works is you're trying to find out where y equals 2x cubed minus 5x plus 6 is equal to y equals 0, right? So you could always put y equals 0 for this other one, and that's going to be your x-axis. All right, so if you do second calc number 2, it's going to be, because notice you're trying to find out what happens where y equals 0, or your root. Then it's going to say, go to where you think the root is. So notice I'm scrolling to the left. The root's somewhere in here, right? So I'm going to go to the left of this particular point and press enter. Then it says, go to the right of wherever you think your root is. So your root is somewhere in there. You're going to go to the right of that, press enter, and then finally it says, guess where your root is, and press enter. So here the root is at x equals 2, and as we expect, it's where the y value is equal to 0. Okay, so those are 3 major functions of your calculator. I'll allow you to finish the rest of those problems. There was one more thing that I wanted to point out, and this is on the other part of your homework assignment. And they ask you to take a look at the points of intersection for these 2 functions, but then they give you what looks like coordinates, but they're not. Okay, so they're giving you a window. Alright, so your window, as you knew from Math 120, is basically how far to the left on your x-axis you're looking at. So it says go as far as -10 on the left. This one says go as far as +10 on the right. And then here you have what happens with the y. So this says go -10 down and go 10 up. So the first set is going to be your x's, and then the second set will be your y's. So if you did plug this into the calculator, this is how it would appear. Okay, so you plug your window in, and it tells you, well, what's the least value of x that you could have, and that's going to be -10. Okay, and then it says, what's the greatest value of x? That's going to be +10. Okay, x scale basically says you're going up by 1. So I'll show this to you in a minute. Your least y is going to be -10, right? You can see that there. And your highest y value is going to be +10. Okay, so notice here x would be -1.5 for the least x. Here x would be +2.5 for the greatest x. And here y would be -10 for the least x, and y would be 2 for the greatest x. Alright, so I want to point something out with these x scales. I'll change this one to a 2 so that you can see what's occurring, and the other one I'll keep as a 1. So let's graph this. Notice we're going from -10 to 10 on the x's, but now we made the x scale 2, so it's going up by 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And then the y scale, we went up by 1, so you see 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 10. Okay, so your x scale basically says what are the hash marks that you see on the x or the y axis respectively.